Meeting. Ask the Podcast Coach for December 20th, 2025.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. It's that music that means it is Saturday morning. It's time for Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. I'm Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com, and joining me right over there, podcasting's jolly green giant from the new media show, the one, the only, Rob Greenlee. Rob, how's it going this morning, buddy?
It's going fantastic, Dave. It's great to be back on your show. I've been on a couple times over the years, but it's always good to be on Ask the Podcast Coach with Dave.
Yeah, Rob was podcasting before podcasting was podcasting.
Yeah, right.
So he's been
I
around.
was on the radio, right? Yeah, I was on the radio. Yeah.
So if you're new to the show, we always start off with a bit of, we get our ads out of the way. Not that that sounds bad. Silly advertisers, but we'll get them out of the way. If you have your questions and you're watching live, there you go. Chris Stone, he summed it up for all of us. Rob Greenlee is a Christmas podcast miracle. There you go. So, excellent.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, that's awesome.
But today's show, Jim is out on special assignment, is what I like to say. And today's show is brought to you by our good friend Mark over at podcastbranding.co. Because look, if you got to remember, they're going to see you before they hear you. And you want to make a good first impression. And I've used Mark for multiple artworks. And if you need more than artwork, he'll do your whole website. The beautiful part of Mark is the fact that he is an award-winning graphic artist and he's a podcaster. So the whole thing where you're like, well, it's kind of like a radio show, but it's not, and yada, 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 yada. He's going to sit down with you one-on-one and look, let him do the marketing part. You're the podcast part. So let him know what the vibe of the show is, kind of what you're going for, who your audience is, and he's going to come up with a great piece of artwork or a website, whatever you need, and it's going to match your brand. And you're just not going to get that from some, I'll just say person on Fiverr. I won't be negative today, but he's a great guy. I highly recommend him. And the other thing I should probably point out, he's much better than AI. Again, you're not going to get that from ChatGPT. Check him out, podcastbranding.co. And then last but not least, Rob, have you ever been to the movies and the screen goes black and a title comes up and it says based on a true story? Has that ever yeah, and you always, have you ever wondered, I wonder how much of this is based and how much of this is just made up? Well, there's a podcast for that. It's called Based on a True Story Podcast from our buddy Dan. And I think to me, this is brilliant. Because if you like history, it's kind of a history podcast. If you like a movie podcast, it's kind of a movie show. You put them together. It's like the Reese's Cup of podcasting, based on a true story podcast.com. Thank you, Dan, for your sponsorship. So
That's awesome.
yeah. So it's the last Ask the Podcast Coach of, well, let's see, not of the year. We'll do one next week post-Christmas so we can all talk about what Santa brought us. So there you go. Brad turned 60 yesterday. You know, they say 60 is the new 40, is still looking for a free cup of, well, the problem with the free cup from McDonald's is they'll dump it in your lap and then you get to sue them. That's always fun.
That's the path to your retirement, getting spilled by coffee.
That's it. And well, Ralph has fed us up a question. How do you feel about the idea that podcasting is in oh boy, he's gonna poke the bear right out of it.
Couldn't wait.
Well, here's my thing. What he's talking about is a post by, and here's the thing. I respect Steve Goldstein. He's got a past in radio, but he has this blog post where there was the episode or era number 1, which always sounds like I'm trying to imitate JFK. Era 1 was the Me Undies. Era. Number 2, that's actually me imitating Howard Stern, imitating JFK. There you go. And then he said era 2 was the spaghetti against the wall era. I get it. Era 3, what is a podcast era? Here's the one I want to ask about. Why did that era exist? I don't get, because if you think about it, if you mix yellow and blue together, it makes green. That's a fact. If you add 1 + 1, it equals 2, and we've all agreed on that. I don't understand, especially people like I think it's Dan again over at Oxford Road has spent most of this year asking what is a podcast, and I heard Cliff Ravenscraft on the New Media Show, and Cliff and I are on the same page. No RSS feed, no podcast. And when Steve again was the guy that stood up with the other guy at Podcast Movement that said, "Hey, you got to go to YouTube because that's a podcast." And I was one of I feel like the few that said, "Hey, that's not a podcast. It's a YouTube, and that's going to really mess up our stats in the future." And I wonder sometimes, especially with Spotify and YouTube, really big megaphones, really big marketing budgets, that they just cram that down our throat. And I'm like, yeah, but why didn't we push back? And the reason I asked that is because Steve he's talking about the liquid content era. And again, with love and respect, this is absolute horse pucky. Why? Because he says, and yes, the debate is still very much alive. Is podcast a format, a platform, a show? Where's the one where he talks about it's a newsletter? Here we go. A podcast can be a YouTube show, vertical clip, newsletter, short episodes, live streams, or even a live event. And it turns out this bottle of medicine is now a podcast. This fly swatter is now a podcast. I'm like, come on, kids. So, Rob, why do you think we didn't push back when they said, because, and again, I know the audience doesn't care. I don't really care, but I hated this whole what is a podcast. I don't understand why people didn't push back on that. To me, I'll let you speak in a second. Honestly, I swear. I think this is why podcasting via RSS was not growing it was growing okay, 3 to 5% a year. And they wanted it to grow much faster so that we could say, look, we have X amount of advertising dollars. Do you think that was the biggest driving force, or what do you think the reason why people didn't go, hey, that's, YouTube isn't a podcast?
Well, Dave, I mean, as I back up and I look at it from the 20 years that I've been in this medium, is that it's always been a cloudy issue. And this whole thing of what's a podcast has been a question mark that many different groups that have had a relationship with podcasting have been asking as well. Because in the early years of podcasting, we had a lot of video. So, and that kind of faded away. And then we saw Serial blow up. And then we started thinking of ourselves as an audio only medium. But the common thread across all this, Dave, and I think you would agree with this, is that podcasting has been known for having an RSS feed, right? And I think, as I think about this, the RSS feed is still very much a part of the picture, and it's very important, but it's very important for the audio part of this conversation, right? And because the video part, we kind of abandoned, a few years ago. People migrated over to YouTube and started publishing what they were doing with their podcast over onto YouTube, and it was just a YouTube channel. And so now YouTube has decided that what that is going, what that is happening, or what has happened with that over the years, is now all of a sudden a podcast. And I think what they are trying to do is link these mediums together, which YouTube and podcasting have been a parallel track for many years. And so this conversation that's happening with Steve is really kind of a splitting hairs of sorts, because I think most people would say that podcasting is the audio side now. And the video side is really a YouTube channel, I think, in people's perceptions. Yeah. But oftentimes it is the same content. So people are linking those things together. And then I've been pushing back against Steve for a couple of years on this topic of his eras. Yeah. Because he's had articles like this out about the eras of podcasting for a couple of years now. And I push back because I think that first era that he has in there doesn't reflect the first 5 to 7 years of the podcast medium. It's kind of like fast forwarding and saying that the medium started in like 2009 or 2010, when it actually started much earlier.
Mark Maron invented podcasting.
Right. Well, that's the same thing that iHeart said for a long time, is that podcasting really started when we decided to get involved.
Right, of course, because we're iHeart
right.
and
Well,
we're
and
number one in podcasting. Yeah.
that's their brand, right? Is they have to be the first with everything. But that's very reflective of what's been going on here with this this era thing. And I push back against Steve. Even my counter is that there was era 0,
Yeah.
which was the first 5 years. But that's not really addressing that core liquid content thing. I think the core liquid content part of this is that I think all of us would agree that what podcasters are doing with their content now is putting it out in all sorts of different formats and all sorts of different mediums now, shorts, full episodes on YouTube, as well as the audio podcasts, and they're creating derivative content and all this kind of stuff. And I think that's what the message at the bottom line of all this is, that it's acknowledging what all of us have been kind of seeing and doing for many years now, actually, is repurposing, redistribution, all this kind of stuff. And that's where that liquid concept comes from. So, I think it is accurate to say that if you're going to call this a podcast, it really has to have an RSS feed that's part of the syndication strategy for the content. So it's really hard to call a piece of content a podcast if it doesn't have an RSS feed, because that is part of that spoke of distribution that really is part of the model of a podcast, right?
Yeah. Well, and the other thing, people go, well, what's the big deal? And the big deal is with an RSS feed, like on YouTube, right? If we say booger too many times, they'll kick us off YouTube. Or if we start whatever, right? And if you get kicked off YouTube and you're primarily a YouTuber, you're kind of in a world of hurt. You got Rumble, but So with RSS, if I get kicked off of Spotify, I mean, look, love him or hate him, Alex Jones got deplatformed. He got kicked off of everything, but he still had an RSS feed. And if you wanted to, and you were kind of nerdy, you could still get his content. That's the beauty of an RSS feed. And everybody's like, well, I'm not talking about anything controversial, so why do we care? And I'm like, yeah, okay, you say that now, but what was controversial 5 years ago is not like back then, there were things we weren't saying because, there's a lot of cancellation going on and things like that. And that pendulum's going to swing back eventually. Daniel has a great point. It's Oprah. You're a podcast and you're a podcast. Everything's a podcast. And Dan Lefebvre from Based on a True Story podcast. If RSS doesn't define a podcast, then literally every single streaming platform is a podcast. Netflix, Disney, Hulu, TV, radio, books. Books are now a podcast. So it's kind of one of those things where I've never understood why people didn't push back. And you said you did, I know I have been, but it just seems like everybody, the one that really just made no sense to me, and I'm not even sure what study it was, but they said they asked the audience, and the audience said, well, anything with a microphone in the shot, so I need to move mine closer or up, was a podcast. And I'm like, why are we letting the audience decide? And again, this is consider the source. For me, I think everything can be fixed with education. Like, inflation's too high. Well, we need to educate people about how to, So for me, I was like, well, we just need to train the audience, because what we're missing is, had we pushed back and we, like Tom's report that he just did about the creators or whatever it was called, there was a part where it's like some are audio only, some are doing both, and some are doing video only. And I'm like, but what if he had said, are they a YouTuber or a podcast? And I'm not sure, again, we'd have to educate the audience, but like our stats would be better, because we could say 35% are doing YouTube only, 30% are doing audio only, and 35% or whatever are doing both. And then I think, like I know Hernan Lopez from, formerly Wondery, he went out and did another report and included international, which we should, but he also included YouTube, and that's how I think we finally got to the 2 billion number. And it just it just sounds like it reminds me a lot of country music. I wish I could play it. I found a song that I swear I'm going to write a blog post about this, but I found a song, and it's something like Things We Learned in a Bar. And when you hit play on that, it does not sound country. It sounds very much like pop. They're definitely, because I went to Spotify and like looked at their top 25 of 25, and some of them definitely had that steel guitar, the wham, 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 and it was definitely country. But there are a lot that I'm like, that doesn't sound like country. And yet now country is one of the highest selling genres. Why? Because they changed the definition. Like what's country isn't country anymore. It sounds a lot like pop. And so
exactly. For many years now, there's been a blending where pop stars have been creating country music because they're trying to reach a larger audience, because
Right.
that's a huge market. Country music is a huge
Yeah. And so
market.
consequently, I remember Steven Tyler from Aerosmith kind of went country a little bit, and it's like, because country wasn't country anymore, but lo and behold, now it's the biggest selling thing. Well, if we change the definition of a podcast to be everything, well, then podcasting is this huge market. And I'm like, yeah, but that's, I don't know. To me, I'm just like, can't we just, like 1 + 1 is 2, blue and yellow make green, no RSS feed, no podcast.
You have to think about where this conversation is really coming from, and I think it's coming from two elements in the ecosystem. It's coming from the advertising side, because the brands are increasingly looking at all the forms of distribution for the content that is seen as a podcast as something that they want to buy, and if they can consolidate the perception of this and roll up. And I know that the IAB is working on this project as well, as trying to come up with a standard measurement model across all these various derivative content kind of experiences that are out there, from vertical video to audio podcasts to YouTube. And they're trying to aggregate those and to come up with a common standard so they can more easily sell them, right? So that's the other motivation here, and that's why you're seeing a Dan Granger start to really address this, is because that's the desire that their brands, that they are their customers are pushing for, is a better way, and a better way to look at this industry, this media industry that we have now, in a more consolidated way, and that's what's driving this. And then there's the influence, like you just said, of the audience. The audience side has a perception that is different than the desired perception that we would like to have as content creators, right?
Right.
So we have this various approach that people are coming into the medium, whether they're coming into creating video first or they're coming into creating audio first. And then there's increasing numbers of people, this is based on what the audiences are looking for, that are doing a hybrid model where they're coming in trying to be, whether or not they're successful at this is the big question, of being a hybrid model, right? Where you're coming in and creating content that can be successful on the audio and video side. And that's kind of at the cutting edge of where we are in the industry right now. And it's also professionalizing, which means that this medium that you and I, Dave, have loved for many years has become the media. It's become the replacement for legacy media.
Yeah, that's the part that drives me nuts is James Cridland made a great point, because Demi Lovato, who I'm really bummed is married, because I was going to marry her, but she's an amazing singer, and she's doing something on TikTok, and they're calling it a podcast, and I'm sure that's sponsored by somebody.
Yep.
And so the question is, when it comes time to do that company's taxes, does that count as a podcast spend or a new media spend? And my guess would be that's going to be in the new media bucket. And now we wonder, well, why can't we get over the $2 billion mark? Because we keep calling things that are a podcast not a podcast. But the accountants are like, that's not, who knows? We'll see. But that's another one that I think is kind of odd, is it can, and I think part of the reason why they're trying to expand the definition, so that no matter if anybody spends any ad money on anything, it goes towards podcasting. And I'm like,
yeah, right. And that includes pretty much everything that's online media, right? So there's a danger that there's kind of be a dilution of the perception of what a podcast is. And it's shifting more towards, it's a format now. It's not, or a form of content, right? Or it's a type of content now. It's not necessarily singularly seen by all these influential interests out there as primarily just an RSS-based syndication approach. It includes that, and it's a very important part of it, and it's probably where the vast majority of the audience is still in the RSS side. So they still have to deal with this download model, and that also is driving this conversation about trying to add HLS streaming. Kind of like what we're doing with this show is probably an HLS stream.
Yeah.
To drive that more into the media landscape, so they can get deeper metrics and data out of the audience consumption of the content.
Yeah. And that, again, I always get worried when major is the right word, but anyway, significant decisions are made, not based on the listener, not based on the podcaster, but based on the advertiser. That's when I'm like, wait a minute. Because I'm like, I don't know a lot of, people like, I wish podcasting had HLS. And I'm like, and I don't know a lot of podcasters are like, I wish we had HLS. But the advertisers would definitely benefit, because then we could see exactly how far people watched. And I think, not that I want to turn this into a prediction show, but I think in 2026, how far people watch or listen is going to become a lot more important than it is, say, last year or this year. It's on the horizons. Have you played with Pod Analyst yet?
No, I have not.
I'm playing with Pod Analyst. That one's free. And then I'm playing with Pod SEO. And all these it's really like, what's the difference between podcasting SEO and regular SEO? The answer is nothing. It's the same thing. See what your competitor's doing, and if they're putting the word in podcast consultant 4 times, your next episode should have it 5. And then, because in the end, I watched a thing I finally figured out how to say this. It's OSHA, because it looks like AUSHA, AUSHA. It's a podcast hosting company out of France, which is great because everyone there has an outrageous French accent, and I love accents. So I love that. And but I watched their presentation, and at the end, and there's nothing wrong with this, I guess, but I was really looking for the secret sauce, and in the end, they showed a slide where someone in the episode was more or less keyword stuffing. They were like, hope you enjoyed this topic. Other topics we cover are making money with your podcast strategy, blah. And I was like, well, that's not new. And then they're like, if you liked this interview with Rob Greenlee, you might also like Cliff Ravenscraft, John Lee Dumas, Abraham Lincoln, whatever. And I was like, well, that's nothing new. That's keyword stuffing. But because Apple is now searching, and this is where I can't get a true answer. I was in a presentation at Podcast Movement where a company said, Apple is searching the description of the episodes. And I'm standing next to a guy from Apple, and I go, is that true? And he goes, no. And I go, then he goes, well, not right now.
That's what we like.
Yeah. He kind of hinted that it might be, but not really. But at that point, he said no. And so that's when I was like, so even keyword stuffing your episode may not be a lot. You mentioned Period Zero or Era Zero. Daniel says, I used to watch a lot of video podcasts so much that my iTunes would crash the network at my job back then, and they had to block iTunes during business hours. Shame on you, Daniel. Podchapters.com. But that's one of those things. I think you make a great point. A lot of people, when they go, video's coming to podcasting, we remember Rocket Boom and Ask a Ninja. And Ask a Ninja ended up on Netflix for a little while. Callie Lewis had whatever it was, Geek Brief, I think back then, or it went through a couple of different.
Right. Geek TV on the Revision 3 platform.
Yeah.
Right.
So there were a lot of, because you got to remember, Era Zero were all the nerds. People often look at the Hall of,
Yeah, like Alil Laporte was a classic example of this.
Yeah, I mean, Rob's involved with the Podcast Hall of Fame, and there was talk at the beginning like, hey, why is the Podcast Hall of Fame all old white nerdy dudes? And I'm like, because at the beginning of podcasting, it was young white nerdy dudes that were getting into it. So
yeah, we all got old because of the development and the growth of the medium. It's been 20 years,
Yeah, and so there was video back then. The problem is it's still the case. Hosting a video file takes a lot more money if you're on Libsyn or Blueberry or Podbean. I think are the only 3 that actually let you host a video. And I did find out Podbean has this weird $29, and I was like, what's the catch? And the catch is they're going to put a watermark on your video. And I was like, oh, that's because I'm like $29
I
for.
heard about that.
Yeah. well, I asked them at, I think it was Podcast Movement, which was interesting because all the people I knew at Podbean are no longer at Podbean. So I don't know what
they basically let everybody go. Right.
Yeah. I was like, well, that's different. They had some salespeople there. And so
I was even there for a while.
yeah. Well, that's a question I could ask you because you've worked at Microsoft, you've worked at Podcast One, you've worked at some big, I mean, you were podcasting at Microsoft. So if anybody's like, hey, who is Rob Greenlee? Yes, he's the New Media Show. But back in the days, if you know what a Microsoft Zune is, then that was Rob Greenlee. And I used to freak out when Rob, oh, wait, does he have one? Here we go. Oh, there it is. Is that the one with the, oh, that one's got a nice case. I remember when it had like a wood paneling kind of look to it. But yeah.
Well, this is the Zune HD. Yeah, if you look at it, it's a tombstone because this device died. I mean, not physically died. This device still works, but Microsoft killed the platform.
Yeah.
And that's when I left in 2014 to go to work for Podcast One.
Because I used to
on this platform for 7 years. So,
well, the thing that got me was like, here is Rob, like Mr. Microsoft Podcast, and you would just give out your email address, and I was like, holy cow, that's got to be insane to do. But was the Zune before or after the iPod?
It came a few years after the iPod.
Okay,
so
I couldn't remember
that's
who
why
was.
it didn't survive because it couldn't really compete with the momentum of the iPod platform. So that's why eventually it kind of faded away. But it didn't help that there was a lot of bad PR around the brown first Zune.
Yes,
came out. A lot of the tech evangelists kind of gave it a black eye in the early years, and then Microsoft kind of lost their momentum behind it, but we did capture probably 30% of the market as far as podcasting at the time. I mean, my catalog, this kind of gives you kind of perspective on how far we've grown. Is that my catalog at Zune was about 35,000 podcasts.
That's amazing.
So you look at what's happening right now, there's like 5 million total ever published, of which about 500,000 are active on a monthly basis right now. But it's, you can just see the scale of this medium. And that's from 2014 to today. So about 11 years or so.
Yeah.
We've grown that much on the content side. So it's I mean, it was a great experience. I mean, I took that Zune platform and put it onto Windows Phone and also built a whole Zune video podcast kind of app inside a Windows Media Center at the time, which was the platform that Microsoft had to enable you to watch online content on your television. So
yeah, let's play podcast trivia. This will be fun. There was a platform back then. This is before, I think, even Apple, because there was a Yahoo directory, but one of the ones that was really popular was called Audio. And we'll ask the chat room, does anybody know? Audio went away, and then they came back as another company that you might be familiar with. Does anybody know what Audio came back? Craig says, I remember sending an email to Rob so that he can manually add my podcast to Zune. Yes. For an assistant, Eddie, we'll add that. We have another question coming
There's
down
a whole story behind that too, Dave, if you want to go into it, but I don't know if you want to.
What, adding people manually?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, let's hear it. And in the meantime, there we go. We have a winner. Of course, Randy being the giant geek he is, Audio came back as Twitter, because Audio had this whole thing where you could follow your friends and see what podcast they were doing. Yeah, Dan has a good guess. Was it Real Player? I remember making 32 kilobit files to be streamed on Real Player back in the day. Yes, now everybody's coming in. It's always interesting seeing how long the delay is on YouTube to get that out. So we have a winner. But yeah, what was the fun part of doing it manually?
Well, the submission process at Microsoft wasn't really designed very well. So people could enter into the submission field in the app pretty much anything they wanted to. So
Nice.
it didn't have a filter against it requiring it to be an RSS feed. So people would submit, like links to their MP3 files, or they would upload like links to their web page, all sorts of stuff. So my database of submissions was so polluted with non-RSS feeds that it made it essentially unusable. I couldn't actually spend all day going through this database to try and find the RSS feeds. So yeah,
that
I
could
had
be
to
fun.
do it manually. I had to go around the Microsoft platform that was built to get really authentic RSS feeds into the catalog, and that's why I had to put my email out. People had to send it directly to me.
Oh, that's crazy. I'm trying to find. Somebody asked about. It was Ray from Around the Layout. He says, "I'm getting no hits in my search for an assistant editor, and I'm trying to find the link." Steve Stewart from stevestewart.me he runs the Podcast Editors Academy, and I thought it was going to be in my history, but it's not on his front page, unfortunately. You could reach out to Steve and he could send you the link. I need to put that into my, I use like a keyboard shortcut tool. And you could basically go to Steve and say, this is what I'm looking for in an editor. They have to do audio or video or whatever, et cetera, et cetera. And he has a giant list of people. You're basically throwing chum in the water. So when you do this, you're going to get a lot of replies, but that's a good thing if you want it. But I thought it'd be on his page. And let me go to the very bottom. No, there's nothing on that. It's kind of a secret link, I guess, maybe, so he doesn't get inundated. But I will, I know he mentioned it on an episode of the School of Podcasting. I was trying to go back and find it, but you could also try you could try Fiverr, but Fiverr, I know people that have found absolutely brilliant people on Fiverr. I know other people that my favorite was the guy that would make a podcast opening for you, and in kind of his sizzle reel, he had you could listen to him doing an opening using Kool and the Gang. And I'm like, that can't be any more illegal than that. So I was like, so be careful on Fiverr. I know Daniel, back when Daniel J. Lewis was doing podcast artwork, not only did they steal his artwork, they stole his exact copy. They just went over and grabbed his stuff and said, this is mine. And what was kind of sad about that is Daniel would go over to Fiverr and go, hey, like, they stole my stuff. And they would whack them and they would go away. And then they would come right back. It was like a bad game of whack-a-mole. It's like for a while, Podpage had a free account. You could sign up for free and it would work. And I don't think you could use a custom domain with it. There were some limitations to it. And then bad people on the internet did bad things. They especially people would go in with their cameras and record a movie and then sell bootlegs on the website. And so it started to tarnish, like Podpage started to be known as, oh yeah, the bootleg movie people. And we're like, no. So we had to, you now have a 14-day free trial. And that's a fairly long time to really kick the tires and figure out if you want it or not. And even after that, you can still play with it. It's just not public anymore. We had to pull it off the internet. So that's how we handled that. But I know I'm of course, I'm drawing a blank on all the different places. Any place you look for a job, like I know, I'm drawing a total blank. But any place you would search for like an HR role, or I'm a marketer or whatever.
Like Indeed or something
Indeed,
like that.
there we go. Yeah. If you go to Indeed and type in podcaster or podcasting or something, I was surprised because I always thought podcasting was this weird, nichey, geeky thing that not everybody. And I went over there and it's like, oh wow, there are people looking for producers, and so that might be a place to look. And then if you really want to just get hounded, there's the podcast movement has a Facebook group, and half the people in there are podcast consultants. Podfest has a Facebook group, and just say, hey, I'm looking for an editor, and it'll be interesting to see. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how many comments come in before the admins like go, okay, we're going to pause this because it will just be a flood of stuff. So it's kind of tricky, and it's always hard too to find, because I know people like Ralph over at AskRalph.com. He's in the chat room. He uses a team. Well, their head honcho is based in America, but the actual people that are doing the work are in the Philippines. So it's really affordable, and so that might be something to look into. Stephanie says, hey, did you say pod analyst? I did. And while I've been talking, let me move some things out of the way. And what this does is you can go into your Apple Podcast and you can add people to just view your stats. And you can do the same thing in Spotify. And so what you can do is I've gone in and played with this. And so you can see, as you might imagine, the purple are Apple and the green are Spotify. And so you can come in and then see, like here, this is not good. A bunch of these red ones. And what it's showing you is the retention rate at 25 and 69%, 56%. I'm like, yeah, I'm not happy with that. And so it shows me the average, but the average, like down here, we got a couple that are 103. And when they're blue, like this one, 81, 76, 64, it shows you your kind of completion percentage, but I can actually go, I think if I click on these, I am by no means, I can click on these and dig deeper into this. And here you can see where, for whatever reason, people dropped off here in Spotify, but not so much, in Apple. It's down here where I start to say, hey, the show's over, that it falls off like a... But what's interesting about this is there are other tools like Pod SEO, which I think I'm using for $20 a month. But you can go in here. Let me see if I go into episodes. Yeah, this is kind of showing how things are doing. I can go into keywords, and this is where you can go in. So here, grow a podcast, how to podcast, learn to podcast. And I can see if I'm going up or down. And if I remember right, yes, of course we have to have charts because, let's see, no chart rank. Yeah, you just have to. You can pull in your reviews unless you want to use Podgagement for that, of course. So you can pull in your reviews. So it's an interesting way to kind of come in and obsess over your stats. But I can see here that for podcasting, I'm ranking third. Podcast tips, number 73. And how to podcast, I'm at 94. And you can, and right now, I think the deal is, because I can see unique listeners, I'm at 926 for the School of Podcasting. The minute I go over 1,000, I got to start paying for it. So if you're up to 1,000, you can get this for free. And then I think it's $49. I heard him on, I forget what podcast, and the guy behind it was saying that, he's going to have a couple of plans, but most of them were going to be around $50. And I was like, interesting. But the difference is if I use something like Answer the Public, which is an SEO tool that's a little more affordable. Another one is, I think it's Answer. I always laugh because it's Socrates, but I still, because of Steve Martin, want to call it Socrates. Because Steve Martin wants, I read all the big people. I read so-and-so. I read Socrates when it's Socrates. AnswerSocrates.com is another slightly affordable SEO tool. And all you're doing with SEO is you're saying, hey, I need to find a keyword that people are looking for. So I want to go play in traffic. Mm-hmm. But I want it so that it's not so popular that everybody's trying to rank for it. But I want it to have where some people are ranking for it, but not a lot of competition. That's your sweet spot.
That's your sweet spot, yeah.
And so that's easy to do with tools like I mentioned, Answer Socrates and Answer the Public. And then you get into the real expensive stuff like Ahrefs and all these other ones that agencies use. But all these SEO tools for podcasting, all they're doing, it's the same thing. You can now see how many times you can say, Courtney Elmer and David Hooper and, all these other people. Yeah. Rob Greenlee is my competition. Daniel J. Lewis is. I could monitor your stuff. I don't know that you can do that in this tool, Pod Analytics. I think it's more about looking at your stuff. But it's one of those things where I'm like, it's interesting. I'm not sure how long I'm going to keep this. It's nice to know I'm ranking number 3 for something, but my show is called The School of Podcasting, so it's not surprising that podcasting is something I rank for. But
you can also get some of these tools as a plugin for WordPress too. So if you happen to be hosting a website with WordPress, there's some pretty advanced SEO tools that you can leverage to help your keywords and your placement of certain types of alt text and things like that behind images and stuff. If you happen to have a website that can help you with the rankings, and increasingly AI is becoming a place where people are finding content too. And I think over the next couple of years, AI is going to be probably one of the primary places that people subscribe to shows and get content. I think is where it's going to go. The big question is whether or not it's going to be human created content or clone created content, or that's the big debate in the AI world right now is what's the future of human created content. I happen to think that the human created content side is going to be strong, but is it it's not going to be the complete landscape of content. It's going to be a blending of the two now going forward.
The thing I was surprised with, that I'm with you. I think, yes, there's going to be a lot of AI content with AI voices, but I went over to Audible and went to kind of browse around, and I was amazed at how many of these, we'll see here, because it used to be if you could get one narrated by the actual, author, that was brilliant. But if I come down, so I'm at audible.com, and it might be different, but I know the last time I was over here, because I was trying to find business, and the fun thing about Ecamm is they throw like 50 little windows up, and so it's here we go, business and careers. So if I click here, but I was surprised at how many of these, if we get out of, I just want to click on here we go, business development. Okay, so there's, here we go, careers and success, 24,000 books here. And I want the one that we just saw the list where, here we go, business, right, current conflict, public speaking. That might be helpful, 441 episodes. See, I want a big giant list, not the bestseller. Here we go, see all in public speaking. Because when I did this before, like here's one, narrated by a person. Of course, these are the ones at the top of the list. But yeah, here's one, virtual voice. And then you come down here, there's a person. But the one time I was over here, it seemed like they were all virtual voice. And I was like, I don't want, this one's really good, by the way, Secrets of Dynamic Communication. It's about public speaking, but that's a keeper right there. That's the one I use a lot, because his whole thing is your episode should be able to be boiled down to one sentence. I remember once I did a talk at Podcast Movement. Every podcast can benefit from editing. That was my core sentence, and then every slide reinforced that. So if you're a public speaker, that's a good one. And of course now these all have people on them, but I swear I came over here and 40% of them were virtual speaker. And I was like, okay, because I'm like, is it going to be a case where going forward, like just having anybody? Because there are those times when, it's an A-list celebrity. They're not going to read their book, and they let somebody else and then you have people like Ozzy. Ozzy probably couldn't read his last book because he had his kind of stammering and such. So they had somebody else, but it just seemed like anything I was interested in, or especially if it's kind of an independent author, and nothing wrong with that. I'm an independent author, but it was a case where I don't know that they wanted to go through the hassle of doing an audiobook, because I've done that. It is not a lot of fun. I know it's your voice and you think it would be a piece of cake. It's not. It was, every time I messed up, these are my words and I can't get them to come out of my mouth. But it just seemed like everybody was doing let the virtual reader. And then I listened to one, and they would do, it was okay, but every now and then it would just have a weird word that would or it would make it a question when it wasn't a question. It was just some weird tone stuff that I was like, okay, we're close. Because you can do this now. This is around for years. You can ask the woman in the tube from Amazon, if you have if you've bought a Kindle book, you can say, hey, Lexi, read, and then say the title of the book, and she'll read it to you. And at first you're like, oh, this is horrible. And then after about 2 minutes, you kind of get used to her voice, and you're like, yeah, I can put up with this. So that's going to be the thing I think we're going to see is I think that's 2026's cage match, AI voices versus human. And so, who do you think?
So we're starting to see a lot of kind of like cloned avatar videos on YouTube now that are fully AI. The voice is AI. I think there's a series out from Mr. Wonderful. I don't know if you from the Shark Tank.
Shark Tank, yeah.
Who's got a whole series now of his cloned avatar actually doing episodes now. It shows him like he would be sitting there, like he's done in the past with himself, but now he's replicated himself. And there's little gesture things that are slightly off with the video, and they're usually related to hand gestures, is what I've noticed.
Right.
The cadence of his voice and his mouth movements and stuff tend to be pretty good, but it's the other body movements that seem to be out of sync with his gestures. And so there's still kind of an element here that it still communicates authentic kind of visual experiences with this too, even though the audio is pretty good. So there's still artifacts in here that are limiting the trust level. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of people consuming AI content now, and a lot of it is people don't realize that it's AI content.
Yeah.
And that's where we're at right now. Is it going to have to be labeled at some point? Or is it going to get so good that it's not going to matter anymore?
Yeah, that's my worry. Is not so much, the current batch of listeners, and not even the next generation. It's the next generation after that. 2 generations from now, are they going to care that it's not a human when they've only seen AI stuff? That's when I'm like, that's going to be. I know. I've talked about this on the show. Are you familiar with Joe Polizzi by chance? The guy used to run Content. His podcast is Content Inc. But he had a big conference for content creators, and he said, we got about 3 years before we're all going to be replaced. I'm like, no. And then I heard where the Washington Post now, from what I saw from the story, you can go to the Washington Post and say, give me a 7-minute podcast about, I don't know, pigs and in the pig market, read by Janie. And it will go, okay, here's your 7-minute podcast read by Janie. Here's all the news about the pig market, whatever. And the fun part is they're wrong. They got called out like, hey, this just said this. And they're like, well, this is how you build stuff. Like we're working out the kinks. And I'm like, call me weird. I think you would work out the kinks before you go public. But I was just, when I first heard that when people saying, well, in the future, you can just dial up whatever show you want. And I was like, okay, well, we got 3 years. And then I read that, oh, no, that's now. And I went, oh, I was very happy to hear that it was bad. But I was like, yeah, but it's here, kind of. So that's.
I keep hearing that the future really is going to look like you can basically dynamically request content. And it will automatically generate it for you on a personalized basis. So if I create, let's say, a clone of myself, that would be part of my profile in AI, that a user could go in and ask me a question, and it would spin up an answer in a video presentation that would be reflective of AI's knowledge about my knowledge, right? And it would have my likeness in there, and it would have my voice, and it would look and sound just like me. It's just that it would be like a on-demand type of a request. So you could offer consulting services or something like that, but you have to train the AI to understand you and understand your knowledge and all that stuff for it to be seen as authentic. And I think that's the line that you were talking about. It's like maybe 2 or 3 or 4 generations here in the future.
Yeah.
That we will get to that point where everything is going to come out of AI. So all of these platforms that we use as apps on our phone will be integrated into the AI, and it will be part of workflows, right? So if you want to take a trip to go somewhere, that back end agent of sorts will it'll still be connected to all these different airlines, hotels, all this kind of stuff will be built into the AI, and so you'll be able to do things, right? And that's what the future looks like, and that's also what content's going to look like too. So all of us are going to have to build at some point kind of our existence inside of the AI to be able to play into this new world, because all of our devices are not going to have a screen that's going to be filled with a sea of icons of apps. That's going to eventually go away.
I live in Akron, Ohio. The Akron Police Department now, when you call, I believe it's 911, has an AI person that helps you get to where you need to go, which sounds ridiculous, but I also have a friend that's an EMT, and there are a lot of people that are using 911 like a taxi. Like, I need a trip to the doctor. And they're like, wait, you're not, like, you didn't lose an arm or having a heart attack. And he's like, there's a lot of people that really abuse 911. Also, from the chat room, the one and only Jody Kringle says, hello, Rob. So, yes,
hey,
it's great to have Rob here. Dan makes a great point about AI stuff. I think the type of content matters, too, a lot. Audiobooks that are informative can get away with more AI voices instead of a very narrative-driven story where voice acting and helps a lot. So that's true. Yeah. And Chris says, oh my gosh, there are 2 Mr. Wonderfuls now. Yes, that's what we needed.
Virtual Mr. Wonderful and the real Mr. Wonderful. Yeah.
And we've got another. Ralph is gonna send us into another fun rabbit hole in a second. Aren't you supposed to indicate, at least on YouTube, that the audio and the video was produced by AI? You're supposed to. I've seen that checkbox. So it'll be interesting to see. But and then Craig from AI Goes to College, keep that in mind. ChatGPT went public just over 3 years ago. Although there will be fits and starts, the capabilities are going to increase rapidly. What's impossible today will be routine one day. We'll take a quick tangent on that one. Rob, a podcast company goes public. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Or because it's a podcast question, is it just the ever popular, it depends? I don't know. But what are your thoughts?
I think it does depend. I'm not sure that going public has really anything to do with how good the company is necessarily. I think going public puts it in a better position to be well-funded. And probably a more reliable company potentially because it's accountable to its shareholders. So that's the upside of it. The downside of it is that it becomes a larger corporation that has a lot more power and influence in the market. And so it can go either way. I mean, I think a good example of this is Spotify, right? Is Spotify and Acast, and those are both public companies, and you contrast those two companies with, and Apple's a public company too, but with the smaller startup companies that are not playing in that type of a market, they can be very good companies too. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's just a business model difference.
That's it. Ray says, wait a minute. There's AI content out there? You don't mean Bob Barker didn't do The Price is Right drunk? Yeah. My favorite, here's the thing, and I think this is what's going to happen. We're going to end up with algorithms serving us so much AI that it's going to be hard to find the real stuff. Because I made the mistake on Facebook, I'll get lost in reels way too often than I should. And somehow I clicked on a video of a gorilla at a zoo, and then somebody did something and it smashed the glass, but it didn't break it completely. And I was like, wait a minute, that's fake. Because if that had happened, it would have made the news or that. And then but now Facebook like, ooh, Dave likes gorillas. And like there was one where there's
flooded with gorillas.
Yeah. And there was one where a woman's in there and they're hitting a boxing bag and she's standing right next to, and we're not talking like orangutan, although they could rip your face off. It's like the big gray, silver top gorilla or whatever it is.
Right.
And she's hitting it and just stands there. And then the gorilla comes over and he hits it once and knocks it off the chain and it goes flying out of the cage. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think she'd be in there. And I was like, yeah, but it's like there was that. And then for a while it thought I wanted killer whale stuff. So when I go to Facebook now, instead of seeing my friends, it's just AI stuff. And I'm like, I have to scroll way to the right to finally see somebody from someone I know besides, oh, here's another giant whale eating like whatever it is, or the porch pirate thing. Like that used to be fun. People would I know there's a guy on YouTube that had a whole thing where if you picked up a box off of his porch, it would blow glitter in your face.
It would explode, right?
And now there's all sorts of fake ones. And I'm like, well, but you know who's not fake, Rob? The awesome supporters that support this show. And you can be an awesome supporter by simply going to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. And these are people like, there is Craig from AI Goes to College, or Ralph's in the chat room, contentcreatorsaccountant.com, lionden.com, I Am Salt Lake. Boy, that guy's been podcasting. There's another guy that's been podcasting forever. And you can be, again, an awesome supporter by going to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. And the show is brought to you by the School of Podcasting, where you get courses, coaching, and community. Use the coupon code COACH. And don't forget, that comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee and 5 hours of one-on-one coaching each month with you and me. And if you want some feedback on your show, I should just take this screen out, because you know what? I don't think any podcasters want feedback on their show. I've come to that conclusion. But I know Ralph will say they do it every Thursday on the whatever show he's now on. Mark Roenick does a show. They do reviews every Thursday, but they don't want, well, I could be wrong. Maybe people just don't want reviews from me. That's it. If you go to askthepodcastcoach.com, that is on Podpage. And if you want to try Podpage, well, check out trypodpage.com. And Jim is not here, but if you want some Jim Collison, you could go to theaverageguy.tv. And of course, Rob Greenlee is right there. And if you're like, hey, I like this Rob guy, well, just go over to newmediashow.com. He's got a rotating what would you call it? A rotating staff of co-hosts now. Yeah.
Guest co-host kind of thing, or a rotating. It's almost like an interview show currently, but I'm looking at some other types of models for that show that can just get more people involved in that show. So
there you go. And I don't know, did we do the Wheel of Names the last time you were here, Rob? Because it is time.
I believe you did.
Okay, it's time for the Wheel of Names. This is where we have our $20 supporters on the Wheel of Names. Some people more than once because they are supporting more than once. So could it be SonicCupcake.com or AI Goes to College or the Financially Confident Christian or castahead.net? We will find out when we spin the wheel. And the survey says it is Greg, maybe? Oh, it's going to be close. No. Shane is the devil. He really is. I don't know. Shane has some sort of weird voodoo on the Wheel of Names. Shane comes up a lot. Spybrary.com, if you are into like real spy stuff, not that James Bond is not a real spy, but if you want like real spy stuff, Shane is the guy to go talk to over at spybrary.com. And he is such a spy guy that he actually got to go on, I think it was BBC Two or something. There was something going on with spies, and his podcast made him seen as an expert. So thank you, Shane, for being an awesome supporter. And again, you can be an awesome supporter by going over to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome, because you might be asking yourself, hey, did these guys save me time or money or a headache, or maybe we kept you educated, or we gave you a good history lesson today? Well, then go over to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. And keep in mind, if you just want to donate once, there's a button for that too. So Ralph asked a question, and I was like, oh, here's another fun one. But I would love your intake on this. He says, where'd it go? I had it. It's about, he asked about paying for promoting your show. And so he says, I've been using Overcast to promote my show. And that shows in his stats. He can see where, a big chunk of his audiences come from Overcast. What do you think about other services like Audience Lift? So that would include things like Mopod, and there are a bunch of those. And here's the typical. This is what it sounds like. We will take your show, we will place it on related articles on major websites like People and Yahoo. To which I kind of go, Yahoo is a major website? Okay. Is that still here?
Yeah, it is, but yeah.
And then they don't use your media host player. They use their player. Mm-hmm. And then you have to be careful because they'll say, and then people can sign up to be notified that there's a new episode. But that's via text, and you don't own that. They do. So if you want to keep notifying people, you have to keep buying the service. So, Rob, have you seen, I know you worked at, when you worked with me over at Libsyn for a while, you were involved a little bit with some of the advertising, and I know obviously you're a consultant, you work with people. What are your thoughts on these kind of sites? Because I know when you turn them on, your numbers go up, and when you turn off the campaign,
the numbers go down.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess that's a good sign. I mean, at least the numbers went up when you use these, but oftentimes I kind of caution people to some degree because some of them can be rather expensive to participate in. And so to think that that's your magic bullet that you have or some sort of competitive advantage may only work if you have a lot of money to potentially spend against these type of things to kind of essentially kind of hack the natural process of growing a podcast. So, but increasingly people are buying Facebook ads or they're buying campaigns on the social platforms. And increasingly we're seeing these social platforms shift their models, like what we've seen with some of these social platforms actually limiting how many external links that you can post in your posts now and saying, well, we're only going to allow you 2 external links in your posts now. And once you get beyond that, you're going to have to pay us to post external links. So all these platforms are trying to keep content siloed on their platform. And that's increasingly challenging, but it's also increasingly requiring that if you want to get exposure on these platforms, that you're going to have to boost your posts or you're going to have to pay to have visibility. And even YouTube is doing this now. So, I mean, they will guarantee me like 5,000 views of my video if I pay $10 or $15 to give a boost. Where they will actually say in the interface that we will give you 6,000 to 8,000 views for $10 or something like that. So there are methods that you can play this game. The question you get back to, but are you really in a position with your show to, if you boost it like that, are you going to pick up a loyal audience? If the show's not probably, of the quality that will retain audience, once you boost it, you may be wasting money. So that's the tension that's in this, but that applies to any advertising, right? If you have a company or a business, that product that you're selling needs to convert, right? And so you have to have a product or a show that's going to retain audience, that has value, that is worth investing in boosting it. So I don't know what, give us your thought.
Yeah. And when you go through, if we do fun with math, right? If let's say, whatever it was for 6,000 views. Okay. So 5%, let's go. And that's kind of high. So if we go times that by 0.05, that means that of that 6,000 people, 300 of them will click on your ad or whatever it is. And if we times that by how many people, let's go 5% again, will actually click play, that's 15. And now the question is, how many of those 15 people are going to come back for episode number 2? So, depending on, and there's so many things that are dependent on that, right? Like number one would be how many people, like, are you in front of the right audience? I was in a mastermind this week and they were talking about Podroll, not the podcasting 2.0 Podroll, but this thing where you end up like a promo for your show is episode 2. And they said, well, they did get some people, but they don't know where they came from. And they don't know, like, if it's a good match for their audience. They like, but we got more people. And I'm like, that's not my favorite kind of marketing. But with marketing, you have getting it in front of people that should be listening to your stuff. That's really the key to growing your show. Finding those people who should be listening to your show but aren't. And then there's the material. So the actual pitch, the actual title, the actual artwork that says, come listen to the show, because you want that to resonate with people. And then you have the landing page. And so is it easy to click play? Is it easy to click follow? There's so many things that can lead to that. And that's why there's a joke, but it's not really a joke. And it's like, 50% of my marketing works. I just don't know which one. And
Right.
so it's
It's
tough
like a funnel, right? This whole concept that's been around online media
Yeah.
marketing for years is creating a funnel of people that will vet people into becoming a customer, right? And that's essentially what you're doing with this, is that you're funneling potential audience into a commitment to be a fan of the show, right? So
Yeah.
what's that conversion ratio? And then you have to calculate, well, what's the cost to get that 5 new listeners, right? So let's say you paid $1,000, but you only really obtained 5 new listeners. Was it worth it, right? Or
Yeah.
should you do it more organically?
Yeah.
So-
And it's tricky because on one hand, advertising in Overcast, Spotify is pretty expensive. Ralph, Ralph's a member of the School of Podcasting. If you go into the docs in the library, there's a thing about how much it costs. And Gary Arndt was on my show from the Everything Everywhere Daily. And he's a guy that was getting 1 million downloads a month. And he does a daily show. He writes it and records it all in the same day. And he was like, man, I can't keep up with my social media posting. And so he just quit, like cold turkey, quit his social media. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what happened to your numbers? And he's like, absolutely nothing. And that's where you're like, okay, so, sometimes I use a tool called Switchy that it's just a link shortener, but it also lets me track, like, okay, how many people clicked on this and how many people clicked on that. And then it's like you said, Rob, it's kind of math. So I've advertised in Pod News because a lot of podcasters read that, but it's all about my podcast auditing service. I'm not sure wannabe podcasters are reading Pod News. They might be. But the great thing about that is James lets you see how many people saw it, how many people clicked on it, and then I can go in and see, okay, how many people signed up for my service from that. And then you can say, well, okay, I paid, whatever, $90 for the ad and I made 120. Okay, so I made $30 profit on that. So it's one of those things you just have to, again, run it like. But I don't know. The thing that everybody wants is the 10,000 download switch. Like, what can I do to get 10,000 downloads in 6 months? And it's like, and the answer is, and it swings both ways. I've really been, the past 6 months, trying to figure out, why do people share stuff? And I always say a show is good if it makes people laugh, cry, think, groan, educate, or entertain. And then I added saves them time or saves them money. But I also have to throw in there how it makes them feel. Yeah. Because I've been binge watching The Big Bang Theory. This is one of those shows I watch off and on, but never really watched it from start to finish. And I love it because, A, it shows you how much of TV is commercials, because an episode is 20 minutes long for a 30-minute show. But there was one, and the whole thing is, by the way, every story is about transition. And this whole show, we're watching Sheldon, who's this giant robot-like super nerdy guy. And by the end of the season, by the end of the actual series, he's a little more personable. And, his roommate is kind of a super nerdy guy. He comes out of his shell. So it's all these transitions going on. But there was one, and it literally made me smile. It was so warm and fuzzy. It just felt like a warm blanket. And I was like, oh, that was a really cool episode. And I was like, why? Because it's making me feel something. So that's something you might look into. It's like, how does this show make you feel? Now, again, so that could be angry. A lot of people love to play, the angry card or the scared card, this week on Dave's Power
Fear
Hour.
is powerful. I mean, if you can create fear in your audience, it's a powerful connection. And if you're a resource to them to feed that fear attraction, then they'll come back, right?
Well, weren't you doing a series? Weren't you doing a series for a while on how much trust? What was it? Something about trust agents or trust?
It was trust factor.
Trust factor, and the fact that people just don't. I mean, you said it earlier. We kind of now are the media. That was the one thing we learned this year, and that drives me nuts. Going back to again the advertising, I'm like, look, if we are the better, like instead of getting these $5 CPM ads, why don't we all just band together, hold hands? Let's do a Hands Across America 2026, and I'll say we're not going to take crap for ads anymore on a podcast because we have the audience. It's kind of crazy on that. Let me see here. Yes, talking about those companies, and again, the people at Mopod are great. Boy, if you want to have a good time at an event, hang out with the Mopod people. They are they are a hoot. I say a hoot. And I know Travis from Buzzsprout is now at Audience Lift. You know, it's just even in this mastermind, we all kind of went, "Are those real downloads?" And we all kind of went, technically, kind of, you know. And so Stephanie says, "Boo! No one reads that stuff." About advertising in these different places. You know, a PR company could do that. That it's interesting. I know. What are your thoughts on? I know 4 years ago, podcast guesting would be a fun way to grow your audience. Do you think that's still effective, Rob?
Yeah, I think it is. I think if you get really kind of strategic or whatever, I know I'm very open to being a guest on pretty much any show out there, large or small, myself personally, but I think a lot of people that are trying to grow their podcasts need to drill into their particular niche area of their topic and try and be on other shows that are kind of derivative of their topic or whatever. Maybe not directly competitive, but though they could be. But it's also really key if you're going to be a guest on another podcast is to really add a lot of unique value to whatever show that you're going to be on. And that takes additional thinking. And sometimes the host of the show that's inviting you to be a guest doesn't always think through that thought process. So I think if you're a guest on a show, the guest needs to take a fair amount of responsibility to not just say the same things that they've said over the last 10 times they've been a guest, is to paint different pictures and to tell different stories and to add value. Yeah, like I've been a guest on like a design podcast before, or on a EV podcast, or on other technology shows, and you just have to bring other types of knowledge to those shows that you have or experiences, and not just tell the same pitch, right?
Yeah. Well, speaking of shows, the New Media Show, how many years did you do that with Todd?
13 years.
13 years, you and Todd arguing over that video is not a podcast.
Well, that's only been the last couple of years. But,
and it's weird because I used to do a Todd Cochran imitation, and it was always funny, and now it makes everyone sad. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to do that anymore. But he's duly missed. He passed away last September suddenly. How, like, you've now brought that show back. What kind of went through your brain on, am I going to continue doing it? How hard of because half the fun of that was, and this is where I think we talked about this when Todd passed away, like you should have a list somewhere of all your passwords and stuff like that. So can you kind of give us the behind the scenes of resurrecting that show?
Well, it was one of those things. I mean, the shock of losing Todd like so suddenly like that just kind of put a real kind of cloud over that show about what the future is and how Todd really controlled that show from a technology standpoint. I was just kind of like a guest co-host kind of a concept for most of its existence. And so Todd was really the guy that was behind the scenes, making it happen. I just was, calling in via, all sorts of different platforms, whether it be Skype or Zoom or StreamYard or whatever platform we happened to be using into his studio, and he was producing it. So he had all of the access codes to get into all the platform kind of elements of the show. And there was a little bit of a scramble just after his death that the family really didn't know how to get into, his platforms and stuff. They didn't know where his passwords were or whatever to log into. And his kids, of which he has 4 kids. I mean, a couple of his kids are actively involved in the podcasting space, and so a couple of his sons came over and kind of brought back to life the Geek News Central podcast too.
Yeah.
So as part of that process, they started digging deeper, and eventually they found some access to the platform that had been created for the New Media Show. But I worked with Mike Dell over at Blueberry, and we recreated the website over on another hosting platform.
Yeah.
And basically we're able to migrate all the content over to this new instance. So I'm no longer on Todd's kind of Geek News Central and Tech Podcast Network platform that he had built on WordPress.
Right.
So this is in a new instance. And so it took some time for us to work through all the details to be able to migrate all the content and all this stuff. And then it was really kind of a choice that I had to make about whether or not I was going to bring it back. It was one of those shows that was really driven by Todd, and so did I want to take it over and kind of be the leader going forward of that show. And
you kind of go from color commentary to being you're the guy that's bringing up the topic, sharing your things, and then asking somebody else. Right. So, yeah. And so, what was that format that I wanted to do? And I think I'm still wrestling with that right now. I've just been bringing on a bunch of co-hosts here in the early first couple of episodes. I think I've done 4 episodes now, but I'm thinking about another format that I might do that might be more, substantial in the medium. But we'll see how it shapes up. I've been doing a lot of different kinds of shows for a while now. I mentioned the Trust Factor show, and a lot of that stuff has been done on YouTube. And then some of the stuff that I've done on YouTube, I've made available as an audio podcast too. But there's series that I have on YouTube that never made it over to audio podcasting. So I've been playing in all of these, these sandboxes of sorts to learn and to figure out how all these mediums work. And I know you play around with a lot of different tools and a lot of different platforms to keep you up to date with what's going on in this medium. And it's a very complex medium now. Yeah, my problem is I'll go over and sign up for something like Pod Analyst or Pod SEO or whatever, and then I forget to cancel. Like, okay, I see what it does. And I've been doing that because I'm kind of doing an end of year. Let's see how the School of Podcasting is doing. I'm like, oh, I don't need that. I don't need this. I don't need this. I have so many. I have like hundreds of domains that I've just gone in. Like just this month, I went in and canceled 10 of them. I'm like, I don't really need this and that. And so that's always kind of
that too. So
yeah.
But I'm doing that show, the New Media Show, live every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern is the current schedule at this point. So I've got some great guests coming up over the next few weeks. We're going through the holidays. So there's probably going to be a few weeks that I don't have episodes, but yeah. And then eventually probably in the new year, it'll be a completely different format of show. So
now as you've been, and you're doing this intelligently by tweaking it a little here and a little here, have you gotten any kind of negative feedback from people like, what do you can't do the show without Todd? Have you gotten any kind of negative feedback like that?
No, I think it's been actually quite the opposite.
I'm going to say, I would think it would be the opposite, but it's the internet. So there's always that one oddball.
Since Todd's death, there's been a lot of questions that I've fielded coming in about whether or not I'm going to keep the New Media Show going. And so that's what prompted me to think, well, I've invested 13 years in that show.
Right.
And it's got, some brand awareness and some name awareness, and why not bring it back? It's going to be on stage again at Podfest. So I'm going to be doing a live in-person recording of the new media show at that event, like Todd and I used to do. So I'm trying to bring back some of the elements of that, but I think it needs a different format. I think it needs a format that is more inclusive of the totality of the podcasting space now, not just a interview concept.
Right. Well, for me, the thing I liked about that show is, you have two like OGs, like capital O_Gs. You had you and Todd, and it was commenting on not just the news, but the space of how does this tie in? How does it affect the space? So the one of the reasons I tuned in is just because there was, 45 years of experience behind the microphone, and it wasn't, you know, so many of the bright shiny stories that show up. Sometimes people that don't have that history of like, oh, we've seen this before. I remember one guy contacted me, wanted my opinion on something, and it was a little thing that made little clips and you could share it and blah, blah, blah. And I said, oh, this is like Clamor. And he's like, what's a Clamor? I go, it's a business that came on that did whatever you did. I said there was no way to monetize it. And shockingly, they went through all their VC money and they went out of business. I go, so, you might want to look at a way to monetize this. And I go, and they had a lot of integrations. They integrated with PowerPress and it was great. It was cool. I started a podcast because you could go in and see what clips had been shared the most. And so I did the Clamor Top 20. And I remember because Jason Bryant had something where he was like, Clamor on, Dave. It was so funny.
Yeah, right.
But, that was one of the advantages of that show is you guys had seen a lot of things and you're like, oh, okay, here we go again. That's like, I'm amazed at, we haven't seen one in a while. I take that back. Nope. I was going to say RSS.com just came out with a free version of their hosting, but they're not a solely free media host. We haven't seen one of those in a while where it's like, nope, we don't charge. We're never going to charge. And then my favorite is they'll say, well, we'll help you build an audience and then we'll get advertisers for you and then we'll split the money on the advertiser. And the podcaster goes, sounds like a great idea. And they podcast for years. They get enough to get advertisers and they leave. And they're like, and now that I'll take my audience with me and I'll get my own advertisers and keep the money. And the free media host goes out of business. I got a list of about 10 of those. So, as we start to wrap up, any predictions? I should have warned you about this ahead of time, but we're going off the top of my head. Any predictions for 2026?
I mean, as always, this medium is an evolution, not a revolution. Though if you total it up over the last probably 3 or 4 years, it has been a revolution of sorts, and not necessarily in a good way. But I think in the next year, AI is going to continue to have a outsized influence over podcasters and new media creators. And we've got some tough decisions that we need to make over the next 2 years about how far each one of us wants to go down this AI path, right? And think about maybe like Paul Colligan created a virtual Paul, right?
Yeah.
And so you start thinking about, well, do we need to clone ourselves to be able to take advantage of the opportunities that maybe are coming with AI, and to create a version of us? And I've been working on a whole new show concept called Spoken Human, which is basically a show that will be an example for how we kind of transcend this evolution around AI content and human content. And that's going to be very important for us to get very clear on as we move into this next era, because there's a lot of AI experts that are saying that between now and 2027, the changes are going to be so dramatic in how we access information, how we share our lives to the world, and how we share content to the world, that it's going to be unlike anything that we've ever experienced before. And I think that is likely to happen, and that can be a scary thing to think about around that shift that's going to happen. And then in that same time frame, the robots are coming, and so that's going to shift things too. But I'm not sure what that means. And then like the Meta glasses, the Ray-Bans, so people will start using their mobile phones less, and so we're going to start to see a transition towards natural human interfaces with AI and with glasses that create like an augmented reality type of interface to technology, and that's going to be a real privacy challenge for all of us to cope with as well. Having glasses on that have cameras that are pointed forward with your life, and you're always connected, and so that's going to impact content creation too. But yeah, I think that's the biggest thing for us to keep an eye on. And increasingly, there's going to be interest in monetization of this content, and these distribution platforms are going to want you as a creator to pay them to find audience. And we're already seeing that happen. I think it's going to get even more. You're starting to see it with Facebook more. You're starting to see it with all these platforms, that we're going to have to buy audience going forward. And that's kind of that's almost like a little bit of a last gasp for these folks too, to some degree. Once they get to that point where they're charging their users to get access, it really starts to lose its value. And I think we're going to see a lot of people kind of just pull back from social media. So
yeah. Well, first of all, I have to hit this noise because that's right. If my button's going to work, my button is still not working. I fixed this yesterday, and of course, but that is because the one and only Randy Black just gave us a super chat. Thank you, my friend.
Thank
you.
There
you go. So yeah, it's 2026 is going to be I know for me, yesterday at the School of Podcasting, we were playing with AI graphics, and I think it's amazing because, I'm not a graphic artist. My niece is, and she's a little frightened, and I talked to someone this week that was a voiceover actress, and she was like, she goes, I'm just losing everything to AI. So she has a podcast, and she's ramping it up, and she's going to start maybe doing coaching for her topic, which was, I think, homeschooling or something like that. But she's like, I've seen the writing on the wall, and she goes, as much as I can say how much better humans are than AI, she's like, when I just hear time and time again, we're just going to use AI for that. So that's kind of tricky. But what is going to be coming up on the new media show there, Rob?
Well, I've got a couple of guests that are coming. I've got Jordan Harbinger.
Now we're talking.
Harbinger show on the show coming up in the next couple of weeks, and so that's probably the biggest name that's going to be on the show. But I'm going to have other folks that are going to be coming in talking about important segments in the medium. So keep checking back.
That's right. January. Did we settle on January 17th? Some guy named Dave Jackson will be on the new media show. I think that's the day you sent me. So I'll be there. On the School of Podcasting this week, I need to sit down and chill out, but I'm going to, again, kind of bring up some of the things. I'm going to talk about what has happened since we didn't push back, and just, I have a lot of little baby ideas. I always call this pod soup or pod stew, where it's a lot of little topics that aren't really meaty enough to be its own episode, but need to be added together. So I'm going to wrap that up as we do. And of course, if you haven't answered the question of the month, if you go to schoolofpodcasting.com/question, we're always looking. The last episode is, what is your favorite podcast and why? And you can only pick one. And we're really interested in the why. And then don't forget to say a little bit about your show, where we can find it in the URL. And please keep in mind, there are no awards for saying the URL the fastest. So you don't have to say, this is Rob from newmediashow.com. It's like, no. You just say it so I can hear, because I want to link to your show. And people always say their URL. So, hey, everybody's wishing Merry Christmas in the chat room. Yes, I always like to say Happy Kwanzaa Masaka. I think that covers everybody. And we'll be here next week talking about what Santa brought us. And everybody have a safe and happy holiday. And we'll see you again with another episode of Ask the Podcast Coach.
Thank you.